you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me, but I don't think you'll be able to respond if you can or can't. If you've been following the sessions up till now, you'll know the protocol at this point, but just to repeat, please do make sure you keep your microphones muted during the session, and also very, very importantly, please do feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A box. So I'm supposed to start by introducing myself. So as should be obvious by now, I'm Judith Ryder. And the reason I'm here is at Michael's request as his editor, as general editor of the translation series, Translated Text for Byzantinists, which of course is published by Liverpool University Press. And I'm here to introduce one of the 2 volumes from the series being presented at this book festival. There'll be another one later on. And this, in this case, is our volume 14, published in 2024, Select Sermons of the Patriarch Germanos II, translated by Michael. Michael himself, particularly in this context, I think, needs very little introduction. And for me, it is a great honor to be able to present, to have this privilege to present someone who is one of my earliest heroes from the world of Byzantine history. He was, of course, at the University of Edinburgh for many years, eventually as Professor of Byzantine History from 1996 to 2005. He's particularly known for his focus on the Middle to Late Byzantine periods, having started out with his well-known study of the Empire of Nicaea, but later moving far beyond. We're delighted at TTB that following his publication with us in 2017, that was volume 4, the 10 volumes before this one, of his translation of Nicholas Mesorites' writing. And following that, he has now returned to us again and returned to Nicaea with this translation of Germanos II's sermons. Now, I'm supposed also to say something about the value and the importance of this volume. And one of the main advantages, I will say, of TTB as a series is that because we're able to publish sizable translations with context, the value of these volumes works on a lot of different levels, depending on the interests of the reader. Michael, in what follows, will tell you a lot more about Germanos and the kind of material presented in the sermons, so I'll leave that to him. What I will say is that I hope the book will be of interest to a wide range of scholars interested in Byzantine culture, quite broadly interpreted, and Byzantine history, and including for comparative purposes. So perhaps also readers who don't even consider themselves Byzantinists. And I would also add that having reread some of the sermons in preparation for today, I'd forgotten just how vivid and individual a style both the original writer and the translator have. So I would recommend the volume to you as a rather compelling read. So at this point, I will now hand over to Michael to tell us more.
Right, you can see me. Thank you very much, Judith. I'll say a few words about the select sermons of the Patriarch Germanos II. And I should also say that I would never have dreamt of translating those sermons. But when I was looking for something to translate to ease the tedium of lockdown, a photocopy of Spiridon Lagopatis' 1913 edition of a selection of Germanos' sermons was all that I could find. Well, you'll be pleased to know that it worked fine. The weeks of lockdown just sped past, but it meant that I was left with a translation on my hands. It was rough and ready, but you'll be pleased to know that it has been much improved thanks to the help that I received from the editor, Judith Ryder, whom I'm very pleased is chairing this session, and from the reader, Mary Cunningham, who I think will make an appearance later. They not only filled in the many gaps in my knowledge of Byzantine sermons, but also convinced me of their importance. The problem with sermons, most sermons, I hasten to add, not the classics of John of Nazianzus or St. John Chrysostom, but most sermons seem to me to offer little by way of historical information, had little literary merit or theological originality. They're so easily dismissed as ephemera, which is what they are. But I suddenly understood that's exactly it. I now realize that the great strength of sermons is their immediacy. Designed for the moment, they focus on topics of immediate importance for the audience. They become a means of creating a relationship between congregation and preacher who was able to turn the sermon into a powerful weapon. Germanus II's extant sermons date from the first 5 years of his patriarchate, from 1223 to 1228, when he was vulnerable to attack from elements at court and in the church, which held his social origins against him. Patriarchs of Constantinople are not usually the sons of fishermen. Signs of contempt appear in the shape of arranging boxing matches in church, in leaving the Easter liturgy early, tempted away by the smell of lamb roasting. To these, the patriarch responded by building up support among the congregation. He used his sermons with their mixture of anecdote, Bible stories, exhortation, and admonition to talk about things that mattered to his congregation, about family life, about the treatment of wives, about the bringing up of children, and at another level, by detailing the posthumous journey of the soul. The patriarch's focus on his congregation is reflected in his imagery, which comes from everyday life, from the farming year, from the rhythms of the household, even from fishing, which was big business at Nicaea, as noted by the geographer Edrisi. But the patriarch's running theme was the maintenance of good order in the church as a prerequisite for salvation. You can judge how important he considered the topic because he came back to it on 3 successive Sundays. It was a way of guarding against the ever-present danger of heresy. One of the patriarch's rallying cries was, "Watch out for bogomils lurking in the shadows." At this stage, he was much more concerned about these heretics than he was about the threat from the Latins. He was even willing to concede that there was merit to the Latin accusation that the Orthodox did not observe Lent properly. He was not advocating acceptance of Latin teaching in its totality, but in a spirit that is positively ecumenical, suggesting that it contained some good things from which the Orthodox could learn. It was only later that the patriarch fully understood the danger from the Latins. But for this, you should turn to another TTB offering, Jeff Brubaker's excellent the Disputatio of the Latins and the Greeks in 1234, to which Germanus II's sermons are, in a sense, just a prequel. Because the sermons cover his critical first years in office, they reflect more than anything the Patriarch's struggle to establish an ascendancy over his clergy and congregation. I would like to think that he succeeded, and that his description of people clustering around his pulpit and hanging on his every word isn't pure fantasy. His Greek may have been rarefied, and his sentences may have a tendency to ramble, but this was balanced by a sense of drama and by biblical subject matter that was easy to follow. My hunch is his sermons sounded better than they read. He created a dialogue with his audience, addressing individuals and groups of individuals directly. We are, in a sense, listening into a series of conversations. If much vital information is left for us to work out, some basic assumptions come over loud and clear. The need to atone for the sins that brought about the loss of Constantinople, the need for an Orthodox emperor to lead them back to the promised land. Around such commonplaces, Byzantine society recovered its equilibrium after the trauma of 1204. Germanus II can take some credit for this, even if his sermons only reveal the first faltering steps. But the good news for those of us who can't get enough of Germanus II's sermons is that Professor Elizabeth Schiefer of the University of Vienna is preparing an edition of the whole corpus of his sermons, for which we can only wish her Godspeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. So I'll encourage you now, all of you, to send in those questions you have. And while I wait for them to arrive, one particular question, Michael. You mentioned, among the various things you mentioned, is the bogomils. And you say that Germanos was particularly concerned about them. Have you any sense why that was?
That's a very, very difficult question. I belong to the Bob Moore school of dualist appreciators of dualist heresy. Sadly, I should say that Bob Moore died a few weeks ago, but his view, which I think is generally accepted, is that heresy is about authority, and that the official church needed heretics in order to impose its authority. And I think that's what Germanus II does. I'm not sure that there's really any evidence that there were a lot of bogomils running around in Asia Minor in the early 13th century, but there were a lot of people who didn't attend church, who lived rather irregular lives and could easily be picked upon as heretics. Germanus II goes off to Lydia, to, I suppose, Nymphaea, in order to beard the man he picks out as the heretic called Leontius in his den. There's no real evidence that he brings forward that Leontius was a heretic, an evil liver possibly, but not a heretic. But heresy is a way in which the Orthodox Church is able to impose itself. And after a trauma like the fall of Constantinople, its confidence, some of its sort of foundations had been shaken, and an attack upon heresy was a good way of sort of recovering from this. That is
Thank you. Thank you.
pretty much
Now,
what I think.
yeah, I've had another question, which is about well, I'll just read it straight. Thank you, Michael. Could I ask if Germanos revised his sermons extensively? If they were easier to hear than to read, did he speak in a more demotic Greek? Oh, and yes, I couldn't see quite who that was from, but I think
Yes, I get that. The only thing you've got that might help you over this, is that at one point there's a mark in the manuscript, and to alert people that they should make a particular note of this passage, which to my mind means that he was expecting his sermons to be read. But whether he revised them extensively, I don't think that there's any information that will help. We know that he prepared his sermons well in advance, but I don't think that that it's absolutely necessary to think that the congregation would have to have the full demotic to understand the sermons. And in fact, they would see this as speaking down to them, and it would not have been appreciated, let's say. But I think that the material of the sermons is such that people accustomed to coming to church, to listening to lessons and so on, would be able to follow relatively easily. And I think also the way in which Germanos rambles, or rephrases, goes back and repeats himself, that this is a sort of technique that I think all lecturers use at different times, but that makes the sermon more comprehensible, whatever the sort of level of education of the congregation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now my computer is telling me my connection is unstable, so I apologize if you haven't been able to hear me very well. And unfortunately, I think because we started slightly late, to get the program back to the timing it's supposed to be on, I think we're going to have to leave the questions there. But thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much to the organisers. And I will now hand you back for the rest of the delights of today.
Well, thank you. Right.